Hey everybody, Roar of the Lions UK, Matt and Ash. We are here looking at OTAs week 2 and looking at news from around the league as well as watching all the press conferences. We haven't started yet, as always, just chatting a bit before we start and getting ready. Hope you're all well. How you doing, mate? How's Ash?
I'm doing good, doing good. Just this weekend played a charity tournament up in Warrington for the football. Got a bit of snaps at corner and safety, becoming a versatile defensive piece that the Lions were sure to love. So we know they know if they ever need someone to come sit on the practice squad, they have my number. They know where to come.
Oh, dear. I love it. I love it. Hope you're all doing well, guys. Come and get a shout out by saying hi. Jeff Hurley with the super chat, $10. And the super sticker, in fact, which says thanks. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that very much. Mark saying hi, guys. Jeff, so glad the academic research year has ended and I can be here. Yay. That must feel pretty nice. Austin Damer's in the building. Hope you're doing well, man. This is not going to be the roundtable show that I was hoping for. One, because of a personal mishap, which meant I didn't even know if the show was going to go ahead, so I didn't want to disappoint the contributors we were going to have. And two, just because it's hard to get people to all be free at the same bloody time. But there we go. As always, if you've got any questions for us, you know what to do. Just get them in the chat and we'll get them in the show at some point. Oh, have you had a good week apart from football?
Yeah, just working most of it. Getting those dollars to save up for a trip, hopefully next year to come and see the Lions actually properly this time, instead of just being in the stadium.
I was with a friend yesterday whose wife is from Chicago, one of my best friends, and he was saying about the fact that he's going to be going out there for Thanksgiving, and I was like, oh, well, if only I could have arranged to have another trip out to the States for Thanksgiving and maybe go to the Sunday game before Thanksgiving and then a college game on Saturday and then head home. That would be so cool. But I don't think I
Yeah.
can make it work financially this year. But he was like, oh, and spend some time in Chicago with us. And I'm like, that sounds grand, but can't make it happen, unfortunately. There we go. Joshua Mercer's in the building on Twitch, says Ash, no Detroit hat besides the Lions can be worn until the Pistons get their new GM. Talk comes back from AAA hitting over 200 or the Red Wings make the playoffs.
Fine then. I was surprisingly more smooth than I thought he was going to be. I'm proud of myself for
Drama!
that.
That really tickled me. That was good. I liked that. Oh, okay. Right, I think we're ready to go, and I don't want to drag this out too much. Debt Fan Man says, I thought this was the goodbye, final goodbye to Sutton video, a good old Sayonara Sutton vid. What's the official Roar of the Lions UK plan for the extra cash? I will format that into a shorter form question than the start of that. But Debt Fan Man on YouTube, what's the plan for the extra Sutton cash? Works very well. Although it is not yet guaranteed, even though Over the Cap have put it in their figures, according to Eric Schlitt, it's not guaranteed, it's just expected. So we'll see what happens with that. Josh just said, I can honestly say I didn't see that coming, Ash.
I am to surprise. I am to surprise.
Carl Wood's in the building as well, saying hello, hello to you. All right. Let's do this.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, episode 273. I'm going to send him into outer space. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Ashley Soden. How you doing, man?
Doing great as always. And while there's not been too much news today, well, this whole week, it's another week closer to football actually being back, which is great.
Yes, less than 100 days now to go. It's what is it, 14, just less than 14 weeks until the first Sunday of the season. Cannot wait for that. We are going to be talking some news, some around the NFC North news, particularly. And then we're going to be looking at week 2 for the OTAs. We've got mandatory minicamp coming up tomorrow. It starts. So there's going to be lots of chat about that next week. Then we're going to be going through after the OTA thoughts a bit of press conferences, which all happened on May 30, so 3-4 days ago now, right in the mix of that second week of OTAs. But first, don't forget to join our Discord channel. Link is in the live chat right now. Great community of Lions fans to chill with all year round. College football podcast on its way back. I know Ant is making some good strides with that. I mean, you can hear him talk, or read him talking about where he's at with his process, and also see some really good college football resources in the Discord channel from a variety of people. So if you like college football especially, do come and join the Discord channel as well. Please don't forget to like the episodes of the podcast, give us a rating and a review and all that good stuff, because it really does make a difference to us, so thank you in advance. Lions Nation Unite, don't forget to support them as well. Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. Twitch affiliated, YouTube monetized, tip jar, just like Jeff Hurley with the super chat on YouTube. Thank you for that, Jeff. You're an absolute superstar. And there's a feedback form down below in the YouTube description as well. So if you've got any thoughts about content that you'd like to see or anything like that, then please do get in touch. All right, news, Ash. And off-season schedule means we are into the third week of that. And there's the rookie minicamp starting this week. So 2 weeks ago was the first week of OTAs. Last week, second week of OTAs. We go into mandatory minicamp now. Then we've got a third week of OTAs before a to-be-determined date for actual camp. Last year it started July 23rd, so we're obviously about 6 weeks away from that. Don't expect that to change massively. But, you know, the off-season rolls on, and not so much, you know, like Ennis Rakestraw has now signed his rookie contract, the second-round pick of the Lions, and things are kind of just progressing pretty well. Have you seen anything which has kind of piqued your interest news-wise that, I don't know, you want to bring to the fore? I have no idea where I'm going with this question.
Oh, I guess since we're discussing the schedule, maybe it's a good time to obviously bring up the proposal for the change to the schedule where they just want to do it all in one go. And I know some people are for it because it makes a lot of sense. You could gradually ramp up coming towards pre-season, but a lot of people are against it, especially the players themselves, because the kind of gaps they have align with how schools work over there, and that, so it gives them time with their family while they're obviously ramping up their stuff. I honestly have no real opinions. Like, obviously, practice because we're over here, it doesn't really affect us. So, but if they do make the change, I can see why having that gradual ramp up period instead of having breaks and it peaks and troughs probably will do some good stuff for maybe the players' conditioning, but obviously them spending less time with their family in this period, especially with the summer holidays for their kids and that, probably will be hard for them. So, whatever happens, happens. But it's news, I guess, to discuss at this point, because I know some people will be for it for obvious reasons. So,
yeah, I think the news would be the proposal would be kind of bad for everyone, and I don't really get why players want to do this, because as you kind of suggested, okay, yeah, you get it all done in one go, but yes, okay, elongates the process, but it also gives you breaks to see your family, as you've suggested. But also for teams, it's not really stop-start. If it elongates the process, okay, fine, if people do take time off in between, that might hurt. But if you're a true pro, you're working all the way through it, but you have time to see your family a bit more as well. And it means that you have a longer time to build on what you're doing from week one of OTAs all the way through up until training camp, which is, you know, a 10, 12-week process. Reducing it to 8 weeks or whatever the proposal is just means they have to get more done in less time. And I mean, if you get an injury at the start of OTAs, you've got time to get back for camp now. Whereas if you change it and you get an injury in the first week of training camp, that might be you done for the whole off-season program, and that's just bad.
Yeah, and on the injury count, let's say, I don't know, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if we had an injury last week, let's say, because it's short spurts, the team's then got a period of 4 or 5 days to rig street free agents and get them on board for the next round. While if it's all the way through, they don't really have that gap to sort of check the free agent market, see what they can do to then bring them in for the next stage. It's literally just frantically just trying to get someone, at least in this format, you can have a bit more time to consider, especially with how we like to choose our players.
Mm.
They need to be culture fits as well. It's harder to obviously do those kind of background checks if you don't have as much time to do it, rather than taking the time that we usually like to do. Like, we still haven't brought in a proper free agent safety, for example. Is it that because we're just making sure we're getting the right person in? Maybe it's just because, according to some reports, it's just not what the team's interested in, but something to bear in mind, maybe.
I would suspect something might happen after the camp. It's my feeling that a lot of these guys don't really want to go through a training camp process, and if there's somewhere that Glenn trusts, who he knows the scheme and doesn't have to go through training camp to do it, that kind of the team are pretty relaxed on it. And I suspect it will happen, but I think it might be the early part of August before we get there, to be honest.
Yeah.
We shall see. The big news around the NFL at the moment is the new contract for Justin Jefferson, which I think was just a few hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about
So
4 hours ago.
The details haven't really been fully disclosed yet, but the headline figures are 4 years, $140 million, which is $35 million average per year. There was something from Schefter which said that there was $88 million on signing, which I presume means
It's
some
fully
semblance
guaranteed.
of fully guaranteed salary and the signing bonus, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens there. But, that's a staggering amount of money. The highest non-quarterback contract in NFL history, eclipses Amon-Ra's contract for almost $20 million over a similar amount of time. What do you think, Ash? I mean, I was going to say, is he worth it? But it seems almost a bit of a glib question. But $35 million is, a heck of a lot of money. He's almost paid as much as, or maybe even the same as Baker Mayfield sort of territory. Like, not far off it. I mean, this guy's almost getting paid as much as Daniel Jones.
Well, I know which one out of Daniel Jones and Justin Jefferson I'd rather have on my team, and it's not the guy from Duke, let me put it that way. He is worth it. He is the best receiver in the league, as much as it pains me to say that. It's kind of funny, obviously, that I remember because I was talking to someone on the way to my American football games yesterday. For some reason, we got into the topic of TCU receivers, and he obviously came up with Jalen Reagor, that he got the pick right before Justin Jefferson, and the Vikings' reaction in the war room when that happened. But he deserves it, and it makes Jamar Chase and CD Lamb's agents a lot happier, because now they've got a new higher benchmark to go for. Even if they don't get the same as Jefferson, that sort of the tide mark has moved up. Same with T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk. These are receivers that are all now going to get a bit more money, pushes them up, and makes Amon-Ra look even cheaper. So while everyone was freaking out when we signed Amon-Ra to his extension, obviously within a couple of days, it was AJ Brown's, wasn't it, that eclipsed it? Now it's been eclipsed again. It's one of those things where we're ahead of the market yet again. And who knows, this time next year, Amon-Ra might not be in the top 10 for wide receiver pay, which would be mad, because this is, as you said, someone that set the receiver market a year later, not even in the top 10, shows a lot. But it also shows how valuable wide receivers are now. And I've seen some people on Twitter, I don't fully agree with it myself, but can see their reasoning, arguing that maybe wide receiver one is now the second most needed position in the NFL behind QB. It's showed in the pay scale now. I personally still say that edge one is probably a bit more valuable to you, but it's happening. We're seeing it with Jefferson, Chase, all the receivers now is going to get big paydays. And I know hell, it might get to the point in the next couple of years where we'll have a receiver go first overall again, which hasn't happened for a while, but the way the league's going, it could happen. And hopefully it's not us, because we'll be set at receiver, but who knows?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, moving on, and the Chicago Bears have been selected for Hard Knocks, which feels weird for a team that has the number one overall pick, but because they got that via Carolina from the trade the previous year, they haven't fired all of their staff. Not yet, at the time of recording anyway. So this means that Matt Eberflus is going to be leading his team into Hard Knocks, along with number one overall pick Caleb Williams. And I mean, this team, Ash, is absolutely loaded up on weapons for Caleb to really give him the best possible chance. They've fortified that offensive line, and they've spent a lot of money in free agency over the last year or two in terms of going and getting, the linebackers and Edwards and Edmonds, but also trading for Montez Sweat. It's a team which has got a lot of personalities. I mean, they've brought in Kevin Byard, who's going to bring his own personality as well. It's a team which could go places. There's certainly the range to do that. But obviously questions remain about Eberflus and, whether you love or hate the pink fingernail stuff that Caleb Williams is going to bring to the NFL. He certainly gets people talking, and this, I think it's a no-brainer selection in terms of who, but in terms of what you're going to see, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't want to say car crash TV, because that's almost reading into things too much and saying like it's going to doom to fail, but you know what I mean, where, you've got those clash of personalities, despite them obviously not being the worst last year, getting that first overall from Carolina, they're still picked 9th overall. There's still questions there. So it's almost interesting to see them. They're very much on the hot seat here. So all eyes were going to be on them already. It's just going to be to the nth degree now with all the cameras there. Obviously, Caleb Williams settling in. It's going to be interesting to see all the training camp footage and that we get from it, reading into that. But of course, it also makes sense for them because don't you know that the Chicago Bears, with the selection of Caleb Williams and that now, are now the 3rd best team in the NFL behind the Kansas City Chiefs and 49ers? Didn't you see those power rankings? Oh, wait, they were made by the Bears fans themselves, and they're deluded as hell. I'm gonna love every episode. It's gonna be sad for me because some of the guys I'm gonna be watching, I wanted here. Dunze, Eric Washington, the former Bills D-line coach, who's now the defensive coordinator for the Bears. Obviously, Tyreek Stevenson from last, and the DTs from last year. But yeah, it's just going to be interesting to get that insight. We've learned a lot from watching it 2 years ago with us. Let's see what insights we're getting to the Bears now, because who knows? Some of the people on there might be putting themselves in the shop window for teams next year, trying to get the hell out of Dodge with that sinking ship of a franchise.
It really is going to separate the men from the boys with Eberflus. Like, I am so interested to see how he comes out of it, because you're right there on the hot seat. But if the optics are really strong and he ends up endearing himself to the fan base more than he has done, and if the team is as good as it can be with trading for Keenan Allen as well as taking a Dunze and that sort of thing, if they do have a good season, let's say they go 10-7, which is good for 3rd and North, but they get a playoff spot, and people think Flus has, looked like a likable guy alongside taking the organization on to the next step, it saves their job. Like, the inside, I think it's a great move for the Bears, given that it's a kind of roll the dice situation, because if it goes badly, well, everyone's getting fired anyway. But on a borderline situation, if they look good, it might be the thing which tips the balance in them getting another year.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I say that, but then I can see, to sort of build on a hypothetical, if that happens, they get another year, but Waldron's probably going to get a head coaching job. What happens then? Because honestly, if this team does well, and I'm not trying to rag on Eberflus at all, if this team does well, it's not going to be on him. He's an offensive head coach. It'll be on the OC. He's going to get stolen up, and they'll have to replace him. So honestly, if there's ever going to be a winner out of them doing well this season and looking good on camera, it's Shane Waldron, who's been around in head coaching sort of interviews for the past couple of seasons, being the former OC for Seattle. This could be the thing that if he presents well on camera, as you said, not only Eberflus, but him, that could be the thing that pushes him to a head coaching job this time next year. Hell, if he looks good, the offense looks good, but the team doesn't do well, they might just fire Eberflus and put him in the spotlight.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks to Silver Rush 24 for subscribing at Tier 1 on Twitch for their 10th month, 9th in a row. Thank you very, very much. All right. That was our last bit of news, so we're going to move on to talk about OTAs in just a moment. We have had a few questions come in, so I might actually address some of them now before we jump into the deep end. Debt Fan Man had a couple. And the first one is, because we're now post June 1, all of the extra money which gets added in a post June 1 cut has now been added to everyone's amounts of money. Over the cap have the Lions at just a smidge over $40 million in available cap. Per Eric Schlitt on Twitter, that includes the Cam Sutton voided money, and we don't have an indication yet that that actually has happened. It's just regarded as expected to happen at this point. But assuming that does come, Defamman asks, what's the plan for the extra cash? And I do have a thought on this. I'm interested to see what you think first, though.
2 players get extensions, at least partly with the money. Liam McNeil, Taylor Decker. Simple. That's what I'll do. I'll reinvest. And Liam, definitely. Let's lock him up on the DT market. He's getting more and more expensive. Let's get him sort of under contract now while he's on the ascendancy, rather than waiting another year and potentially having to pay him 5-6 mil or more a year. And then Decker, last year of his deal, but he's still playing well enough as a top, don't want to say top 10 anymore, though I'd maybe put him there looking around the league, but it's definitely top half of the league starting tackle. Let's keep him under contracts, especially since right now we don't have a proper succession plan. I know we took Manu this year, and he's definitely got the upside to be a great left tackle at some point in his career, hopefully. Cough, cough, totally not hopefully releasing an article on that in the next week. But we don't have a succession plan if he goes the end of this year. So get him tied down as well, even if it's just another year or two, just to give us a bit more time to work things out, be it getting someone ready for right tackle and then doing the flip, which I don't want to do personally, but it could happen, or getting a proper succession plan at left tackle, who's a great pass blocker technician like Decker.
So, and Brian Shook has made exactly the point I was just about to make. Extensions wouldn't really count against this year because the cap in year 1 is always less. So I actually don't think this additional money is going to pay this year. Now, if we decide to roll it over, then it can affect the year 2 amount of money, and I'm all for that. That makes all the sense in the world. So if you do want to sign you guys, yes, but make sure you're rolling over the cap to pay for it. I actually think they're going to spend this money looking at the sort of San Francisco thing that they did last year of taking 1-year rentals by cheap trade and taking on cap for players who can push you for a run. And I've picked out 2 guys, actually from a CBS article which came out very recently. Let's see when it came out. It was by Cody Benjamin on May 30. 2 cut or trade candidates they have there, which I think would be very interesting for the Lions. First one could take or leave, but I think actually would be a very sneaky good guy for us. Wide receiver, and I'm going to say this with no irony whatsoever, from the New York Giants, Darius Slayton is meant
Slayton, yes.
So he is meant to be a cut or trade candidate. Very, very good receiver on a very, very bad team. Basically carried it himself. He's been going up against number 1 cornerbacks without having a good quarterback or anyone to attract attention away from him for the last few seasons, and he's still managed to produce. I think you can probably get him for a late day 3 pick. Cap-wise, I think that might cost you something like $6.5 million, which is pretty steep. But getting him on board, taking the snaps that Josh Reynolds has left behind, I think he's a cut above someone like DPJ at this point. So I think that would fill a gap for us on a 1-year rental for maybe even a pick swap. 7th round pick swap, potentially. I mean, the funny thing about a pick swap is it actually be in the Lions' favour because we're likely to have a lower draft pick than they are, but, never mind. Maybe a 6 for a 7, therefore. But
it would, over the cap says 6 million.
6 million. So I think that would be a great move, but I think that's lower key than the move that I would actually really like us to make, because the person underneath this on the article is, and I'll say this with no irony considering my history with this team at this position, a New England Patriots outside linebacker defensive end in Matthew Judon. Matthew Judon, 32 years old, $6.7 million on the cap, but 4-time Pro Bowler. He wrecked us a few times when they've played us. I think he's an absolutely fantastic player at the back end of his career. We need sort of edge help, and maybe he's stylistically maybe not the perfect guy for us in terms of an edge player, but in terms of a Sam role, as well as playing a bit on the edge, I mean, is that cannibalizing some of our youth in terms of where we want them to take snaps? Maybe so, I don't know. Would that edge out Matthew Betts? Probably yes, but I mean, it would be... I would say a pretty big upgrade on the sort of caliber of player we have at the moment starting in that position. So there's two guys I think that we could maybe take on in terms of cap dumps from other teams that would improve us now. Maybe as starters, maybe as depth, maybe as kind of a hybrid of both. But I think that would be fun. Any thoughts on Judon?
So, Judon, he would be more for that fit for that sort of Sam role because obviously he used to play in Baltimore and their outside linebackers are pretty much always great at that sort of Sam defend the run, defend the pass, both in terms of pass rush and coverage. Look at like Titus Bowser, for example, someone who's always seen as like a low end edge two, creating that Baltimore scheme. And then obviously, Sir Judon was there for a good 5 years, then got that payday from New England. And first 2 seasons great. Last year, a bit of a downturn, but he might be worth it because even if you don't stick him at that Jack Sam role, having him as the rush end, just a bit more there because you can then move Aiden around. It gives you a few more options. It's not the biggest, flashiest move. It's obviously not like the X receiver that I keep calling for. It's not more O-line depth, which we need, but it just gives you another piece in that edge room, which we were kind of hoping for in this draft, maybe. And it just gives you more options. It just gives again more options, especially since we've got the cornerback room pretty much set now, hopefully 5-6 deep there. Get a few more edge pieces, and then we should be great on defense. Like, I'd be for it. It's again, it's a 1 year rental. It's not the flashiest thing, but if it works out, great. If not, maybe someone else takes a bet of that upside and you get a low comp pick for him, maybe, because that's what we need to be doing now is kind of playing the comp pick game with that kind of franchise now where that's where we might start getting some steals.
And I think Dat Fatman's being a little bit glib with this last one, but just saying, you're saying defensive end 1 is worth close to or more than wide receiver 1. Add a year for inflation before future signings. What are you signing Aiden to? And please be bold, he says.
Okay, give me a second. Smart track, because I can't remember stuff off the top of my head. But so obviously I know Justin Jefferson's just eclipsed Nick Bosa for the most expensive non-quarterback one, and I think that was 33 mil. If Aiden has another year like Bosa, we are looking at that like 32, 33 mil, I think, off the top of my head. Let's have a look at active contracts. Come on, Spot Track, you can do this for me. There we go. Edge. Now we're talking. Yeah, so Bosa was 34 mil. There's a massive gap there as well. I'm looking now. There's a gap between 34 mil for Bosa and then Josh Allen, who obviously just signed his extension with Jacksonville, 28.25 mil. Fitting right in there, probably edging more towards Bosa for me. So that 32, 33 mil mark could be reasonable if Aiden has another year like last year. If he drops off slightly, 30 mil. But it's just because for me, the reason I said that for me, edge is still the premium position behind QB above wide receiver is because just look at the amount of wide receiver talent coming out of college these days. We've just had an historic offensive draft with all these great receivers, like so good that a first round talent like Keon Coleman fell to the second round and all that. Yes, right now you pay the superstars, but it's getting to the point now where if you take a receiver in the first round and they're an average wide receiver too, you're probably more likely than not these days to let him go get paid on the receiver market and then bring in a new guy. Case in point with that, us with Kenny. Brad Holmes read the market, thought, you're the kind of receiver that works with Stafford, you're not going to work with Goff. Let's give Romeo Crowder the franchise tag. Let Kenny get paid by the Giants, bring in a new guy, and he brings in Amon-Ra, who works perfectly Goff. That's what we're moving towards now. You pay your wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 2s and 3s, you can let walk and get a new guy in a rookie contract, and it's going to be a lot better for you cap-wise.
All right, let's move on to OTA week 2. So obviously, since we are, and can you tell from the accent, not from Detroit, then we haven't been able to attend this week. Maybe that should be the bit. We haven't been in Allen Park this week, sorry. But what we
yeah.
have done is we've been the best damn researchers that we can be with taking our analysis from a wide range of people to try and distill for you exactly what's going on from a range of perspectives. So taking these from Tim Twentyman of DetroitLions.com, from Jeremy Reisman of Pride of Detroit, and from Justin Rogers of the Detroit News. So per Justin Rogers, we were missing the following players at camp. They were Decker, Ragnow, say camp, I mean OTAs obviously. Decker, Ragnow, Zeitler, Gibbs, Green, Awasika, Mahogany, Anzalone, Davenport, Houston, Reeder, Pico. That's defensive tackle Pico, if you're not familiar with him. I only say that because I forgot he existed, to be honest. Cornerback Davis, Branch, Mosley, Craig James, another one that I am not particularly familiar with, and Kirby Joseph at safety. So a wide range of players not available for the Lions at OTAs at the moment. But on offense, just to the general upside, Jeremy says that the offense started much better this week compared to last. Last week, very, very bad. Just looking kind of rusty. But this week, Goff had 2 really nice deep passes, but had a pick in situational drills. Hooker took a lot of the reps and had a bit of a rough day, according to Jeremy, with accuracy issues and miscommunications, including, instead of throwing a wide receiver screen, it wasn't a wide receiver screen, but Stephen Gilmore was there for a pick 6, which is not great. But Dan did note in the press conference that Hooker had a strong practice the day before all of these notes were taken. According to Tim Twentyman, Hooker had an up and down day, but did show terrific touch with a sideline pass to running back Jake Frunk and a tight window throw to Doris Fontaine. Fountain?
I think it's Fountain.
Yeah, and according to Justin Rogers, Hooker's processing hasn't quite been fast enough, which has been resulting in some hypothetical sacks that you'd like to avoid. According to Tim Twentyman, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been mid-season form already, catching passes all over the field. Jeremy has been talking about JMO, saying that he's had a really nice kind of OCA process so far. He had a really nice, difficult deep ball catch with the tracking and that sort of thing that's really played him throughout his Lions career so far. That seems to be coming on strong. Justin Rogers said much the same, with compliments about his deep ball tracking. Jeremy also talked about Khalif being the other guy to pick up the deep shot that I spoke of earlier that Goff threw out there. Fountain, who I mentioned earlier, had a really good day. Apparently the chemistry with Hooker is apparent. It's basically his number 1 target at this point for the twos. Colby also, after repping at tackle in week 1, was being played at guard in week 2, and according to Jeff Risdon of the DLP, played everywhere but centre, so left and right guard, left and right tackle. Antoine Green was sidelined, which meant that Donovan Peoples-Jones and Khalif Raymond were taking the first team reps alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown and JMO. And generally speaking, the run game struggled, although much of the offensive line is missing. And of course, we are not in pads right now, so it's kind of hard to judge. That was the final one I had from Jeremy. Your thoughts so far on just all of those points on the offense, Ash?
It's just one of them, like, it's good that the kind of, it sounds bad and it obviously is a cliche. It's good Goff and Hooker getting the sort of bad stuff out the way in camp. Just work through the experimentation period, work out what works, what doesn't work on the throws. So when it comes to preseason games and obviously week 1, 2 and that, you know what works, so you don't make the mistakes. And it kind of makes sense that Hooker is still having processing problems because he didn't get any proper snaps last year, obviously coming off the ACL and then coming from the Tennessee system that's you read half the field, and it's a lot of deep shots and screens and that. This is his first proper time in a pro-style offense for a while. I know obviously he played at Virginia Tech before he played for Tennessee, so he has had a few snaps in sort of a proper pro-style, read the whole field kind of offense, but that's in college on a not very good Virginia Tech team, not to rag on the Hokies too much. So kind of makes sense, but obviously he's showing some of the stuff. So I know, I think it was again from Riz on his sort of mailbag that he did on camp this week. Hooker makes a mistake and then he works from it. So I think it was that sideline pass to Jake Funk. It was right after he made a bad play. Next one hits him perfectly, which good news. He's learning from the mistakes. Great to hear that the receivers are stepping up, especially Fountain. He's someone who has that X-style build, played quite well for the Bears last season in preseason, and then we picked him up on cuts. If he can still keep developing that, maybe he can squeeze onto the bottom of the roster as a special teamer, maybe get a few opportunities in those sort of possession roles that I keep saying about. And it's nice to hear that Sorsdal's getting used. And obviously, people were a bit worried when we've took a guard and a tackle in this draft. Was he really worth the pick? But the fact that he's playing everywhere but centre, so obviously playing I think he was playing right guard initially with the first team. Then when Graham was sitting out, he went to left guard. The second team, he was playing left tackle, playing here, there, and everywhere. It's nice to see the training him up because he probably will be the first reserve at a lot of these roles. So other than obviously safe centre where Glasgow's going to be that. But if it comes to the point where Frank has to miss a game, you can slide Glasgow to centre, and then you've got someone now who is trained well enough maybe to slide in that left guard and play a role. If Zeitler goes down, you can slide Zorsdal there. It's nice to know we're developing that depth there because that's something we're obviously all worried about because behind Zorsdal and maybe our seeker and skipper, we don't really have anyone. So it's nice to see that maybe we won't have to rely so much on our seeker because he's good. He's a good run blocker, not so good in pass protection. Zorsdal could be better than that. It's a bit nicer for me. And yeah, with the run game, we won't know until the pads are on. Unless it's like sort of dropping balls and like dropping the balls and hitting the right holes and that kind of thing. But again, we won't really know till pads are on because that's when the O-line, the D-line and them can start playing properly.
It's going to be really interesting to see whether our seeker makes the roster because Manu's not going to miss out given where they've taken him. Sorsdal is not missing out given what they're doing with him. They clearly love Skipper. I think Skipper and our seeker is the battle even though they play different positions. And then does one of the centres catch on between Clemens and Agukun and Hudson? Because, you know, maybe you don't want to slide Glasgow. Maybe you just want to play your pure backup centre to come in and keep everyone else where they are. So I think that kind of, if you have Sorsdal and Manu as chalk, who offensive linemen 8, 9 and 10 are and how many of them we actually end up keeping, I think is one of the stories of the race to 53. Yeah. Really. Want to give a big shout out to mile marker 301 with a $20 super chat. Thank you, my guy. Says, here's to the most optimistic summer for the Pride. Appreciate that very, very much. And it is a fun time. We're going to get to the press conferences in a bit, but someone does allude to that during all of this. Right, let's do the rest of the takeaways from the OTA analysis. So, not a huge amount on the rest of this, actually, but on defense, Terrion Arnold came up with a pick in the first situational drill. First play that Jared Goff had, it looked like he held on to the ball a bit long, was throwing a ball to JMO. The play itself is in question. Jeremy Reisman says it was on a crosser to JMO. You had Justin Rogers saying that it was an intermediate comeback route. I guess they kind of look similar, but for me, they're run opposite to each other. A crosser obviously goes wide from one formation to another, whereas a comeback route is, generally speaking, in to out from the same side of the line and then back towards the line of scrimmage. So, not sure what's happened with that, but it's not particularly important. What did happen was that Terrion was extremely sticky in coverage, kind of just pulled the trigger when he saw Goff going to make the throw and just ripped it out of JMO's hands. So there's no real suggestion that Jared Goff's throw was poor. Maybe just he held on to it a bit too long and could have potentially thrown it away. But that Terrion just made a great pick and nothing on JMO it being a bad catch or anything like that either. So impressive to see that Terrion's hitting the ground running in that respect. Matthew Betts, according to Jeremy, has made a real impact on the edge, although they're not in pads yet, so it's hard to say. But he's chalked up 3 sacks or half sacks in his position, in the Sam linebacker position. And that Sam position actually means he does have to work in coverage as well, and apparently that is still a bit of a work in progress for him. And also, Amik Robertson had a strong day, nearly got an interception on an out route intended for Sam Laporta, so good to see him doing good on the outside there for Amik. On special teams, interesting discussions with these. So James Turner was good from both kicks in the situational drill, so from 54 and 52. And the one from 52 apparently would have been good with almost 10 yards to spare, so might have been good from 60, 61-ish. But actually missed both of those kicks, 54 and 52 yarders. But if you listen to Jeff Risdon and the DLP, he specifically mentions that he actually hit something like 20 of his next 21 or something like that, including 8 in a row. And that included a 61-yarder that would have been good from 64, which is a sort of range we haven't seen from Michael Badgley in his entire career. So that's exciting to see, but at the same time, it's fine when it's not in the situational drills and everyone's watching you, if you know what I mean. It's a shame that he couldn't do it in that sort of scenario, but we have heard that he's had a better camp than he has had historically, and his leg looks good, so that's something. And there were at least 2 skirmishes at OTAs, at least one involving Levi, potentially, according to Jeremy, with his helmet being ripped off. And something that Aiden said about it being a sort of change in mentality of the defense. It sounded almost intentional. And several of the people who have been interviewed have talked about the fact they kind of like that, and that it kind of brings a camaraderie and it brings people together. Even when people are going through the adversity, that you're kind of growing as a team in that. So interesting that that's the angle that's been taken there. I do think Dan Campbell has said that he doesn't mind this sort of thing at all, at least in camp. So Ash, what do you think about defense, special teams, and those fights?
Well, flashback to year one of Dan's sort of regime here. And he says he doesn't mind it so long as it doesn't blow over and it actually properly, you start getting punches, then it's not acceptable. So it's nice to see that obviously the players are already fired up, especially Levi, because he's someone who is very much fighting for a roster spot at this point. Like, it's not his fault, obviously, that he's had injury issues, but the writing very much is on the wall for him right now, because we've drafted someone else who plays his exact position in Meki Wingo. So nice to see he's got that fire in him and he's really trying to work for that roster spot. As for the defense, nice to see Betts sort of making that impact. And even though it sounds he's pretty much similar to Houston in the fact that they're good in the pass rush, not so good on the coverage bit. But as long as we can work that out and maybe not have to put them in positions where they're having to do coverage, like covering a tight end on a crossing route, week 2. I'm going to keep bringing that up until they actually fix that bloody part of our scheme. But as long as they don't put them in those kind of positions where that's going to be used against them, it's all good. But it's nice to see someone else is stepping up in the absence of Houston in that role. And then the rookies making plays. Love to see it. I think it was on the Robertson one. After that, the defense was hyped up for him, and we're giving it to the offensive bit after that. So it's nice to see they're integrated into the sort of defensive camaraderie as well. And then with the special teams, nice to hear both our kickers have sort of been using the leg press machine, doing the squats and that, getting that leg power up a bit. Though, yeah, as you say, it would have been nice for Bashley to hit them in the situational drills when we kind of needed him to, rather than basically kicking against clean air. Like, against clean air, pretty much anyone could probably kick a bit further than he will do in a game situation. Like, not to bring in College too much, but I've seen some of our freshman kicker kicking from 61 yards and hitting it. All well and good. Let's see it in a game. Hopefully in pre-season, Dan will use these kind of situations to experiment and see if Badgie can actually do it from 61 yards in a game situation. Admittedly, looking at the fortunes of everyone's favourite UFL kicker, it's easier to kick in forward field than it is outside. So maybe we should also experiment if we don't have an outdoor game in preseason, unfortunately, so we won't be able to probably see that. But experiment, see if they can actually do it, and if not, then probably stick with Badgley. But if there's an upgrade to be made, make it. But at this point, it's just keep buying into the whole kicker carousel. I won't be surprised if by the end of this season, if things go the way they're looking to, we've had 3 kickers on the roster again, kick for us, because that just seems how the NFL is these days. You have 2 bad weeks, you're gone. Then you sit for 2 weeks, and another team who's had a bad 2 weeks where their kicker cuts their one, and you get picks up again. You rarely have someone you can trust these days, unless you're Justin Tucker. Oh, I was about to say Harrison Butker, but probably not anymore, unfortunately.
No matter what he thinks about women, he's still got a hell of a leg. I'm sure he's absolutely fine. I would have said Robbie Gould, but it feels like the 49ers have wanted to get rid of him for ages. So
yeah, and I would have set McManus as well, but not anymore. He's been cut. He was cut yesterday.
Yeah, whoops. Never mind. I remember when there were people when he signed it in Jacksonville saying, "Why didn't we sign him?" So thank God we did not. Anyway, moving it on to a review of the press conferences that happened in the second week of OTAs, we heard from Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Scotty Montgomery, Aidan Hutchinson, Broderick Martin, Hendon Hooker, and Sam Laporta. So we'll just give you a brief synopsis on what we heard from them. So Dan Campbell, he was asked initially about Ben Johnson and about what he thought about him coming back, and he basically said, Ben can see what's out there now, but he also can see what's ahead and what might come, and that he's just a perceptive guy, and that, you know, he sees a great opportunity here, but wouldn't have been surprised if he'd taken one outside either. And he said, without my coordinators, none of this works. So kind of giving all the credit to him. He said, it doesn't appear that anyone has kind of come in and taken a step back in terms of progression. Sam Laporta, he doesn't think that he'll get caught up in the big numbers that he did last year. He's just going to execute his job, whether that means his numbers fall or not, because there's more mouths to feed now, potentially. So the Hooker's definitely showing improvement, showing some encouraging signs after almost saying last week that he needed to earn his job at the backup. So that's encouraging to hear. About training camp and about the potential to change it into one big thing, like we were saying earlier, he said he's just going to lean generally on what's best for the team, but he's kind of in the middle between the organisation and the players. And he said, however it goes, we'll just make it work for us. So in some ways, he kind of doesn't mind either way. He also spoke about the prospect of an 18th game, and he says, you know, he sees the value in what the preseason games can do for depth players in terms of bringing them through the extra reps and that, you know, building out your roster. But again, that they'll make it work if there is an 18th game. In terms of sacks, Otis, there was the quote that everyone wants to throw out there about him saying that pressures are more important than sacks. But listening to the whole thing, the real key of what he's saying there is that it's pressures which affects the quarterback negatively as opposed to pressures as a whole. Because if you narrow what pressures are to pressures causing a negative play, then you're really not talking about getting to Lamar Jackson, but he sees the hole behind the runner and can escape for 50 yards. Because yes, he got pressure, but they got a positive play. It's about collapsing a pocket in on a quarterback so he can't escape. And, you know, well, maybe you don't get the sack, but maybe they panically throw the ball away, and that means that you can make a play by making an interception or causing a fumble or something like that. So on a very, very narrowly defined basis, he said the pressures can be just as important as sacks, although he'll take the sacks too. I thought he was very carefully worded that, so it was a shame that people kind of jumped all over that for me personally. And in terms of fitness, he said everyone's coming in good shape, calling Aleem the underwear model, which I think was a throwback to last year, but I just love that. It's a great comment. I was surprised that he didn't mention Broderick, who obviously we'll come on to because he's obviously changed his body in a very similar way. Ash, what do you think of what Dan Campbell had to say?
I agree with him. And the thing that sticks out to me is the sack total stuff, because as someone has a bit of experience with it, admittedly, flag football is a lot different from normal football, but those pressures are the reason that I still have a spot on my team, because for some reason, I don't really get many sacks, even though I did get one this week on a 4th down. I'm very proud of that. I get it. If you get in the QB's face and force him to hurry things up, the people in the back end pays dividends. The amount of like PBUs and interceptions that get caused from it because you're rushing the QB's process, maybe having to throw around you instead of throwing normally. Yeah, it just forces them into mistakes that DBs can pick up on. And for example, it's happened this week for us. There was quite a few exceptions that happened, though unfortunately one of our DBs did also dislocate and fracture their finger on their dislocate and fracture their little finger on an interception that I caused. So rest up, McCandy. Hopefully you get better soon, you glass cannon of a man. But yeah, everything else, like the training camp, will it do us the preseason games? I don't want us to lose a preseason game for that exact reason. You need time for your rookies to get proper game snaps and your depth players to fight it out, because yeah, it's all well and good having an 18th game, getting more TV money for that. But if you're sacrificing yet another preseason game, I know the big players don't usually like them, but they can just sit it out at this point. Like you won't see Goff playing in a preseason game. You probably won't see Amon Ra, Sam Laporte, all these it's for the depth players, and you're just taking away opportunities for them to get game reps, to put game tape out there in case the team's cut them. Another team can then pick them up. We've done it past couple of years. Romeo Crara, initially, we had preseason against him. We had the tape on him. Giants cut him. We pick him up. He becomes one of our best edge players for a couple of years. John Kaminsky, Benito Jones to an extent, Isaiah Buggs to an extent. These are guys who've got game time in preseason, put tape out there. We've picked them up, and they've been good players for us. So to take that opportunity away from those players is just for another game and more money. It's not right, but league's gonna league, I guess. But yeah, everything else I pretty much agree with. Hopefully Ben sticks around. It really does sound like he is waiting for the right opportunity, and if and when that comes, more power to him. But for as long as we can keep him around, let's keep him here, because he's one of the best offensive coordinators in the league, and we can't really replace him right now.
Many thanks to One Prado 47 subscribing at Tier 1 for their 14th month. Says, "What's up, Lions fans? Appreciate you, man. All of these sort of subscriptions and all that sort of stuff, it really, really does help progress the show. I maybe know that it hasn't looked like it's changed too much in the last 12 to 18 months, but it's gone from us putting money into being self-sufficient, and now hopefully we're getting to the investment stage in terms of making this all look better, and you guys are all making the difference in that, so thank you." Ben Johnson next up, and he says, in terms of not getting high draft picks in the offense for the first time since he's been the Lions OC, he says, in fact, it kind of has changed very little compared to what they've done in previous years. So they came in having plans for all the guys that are in there, and they still have those plans, as opposed to having to plan for someone new. So in some ways, the change is easier to deal with because they don't have to account for anyone else. And in fact, in certain areas where they've had some young talent that they then have to bring in, and it kind of restricts opportunities for the people that are already there, it now means that the existing players now have greater opportunities to impress compared to where there's greater competition, and yet the competition is exceptionally there, you know. So it's one of those things where, you know, it might be a blessing in disguise for some of these guys. Talks about an analogy from Dan Campbell in 2021. This is about Ben and the decision to stay, but he says that Dan talked about being like in a ship in the Arctic in 2021 that you're kind of navigating, trying to miss all of the icebergs when you're when he said that you kind of, as the captain of the ship, you can see the path to the Caribbean. Why I wanted to say that in two different ways, I don't know. The Caribbean. And he said basically, as a synopsis to that point, I want more days in the sun. So he's put in the work, he's put in the graft, and he wants to reap the fruits of his labour a little bit longer, and not have to go to a situation where you're going back into the Arctic again and building it up from the start. And I think that speaks to the opportunity that he's waiting for, Ash, and I'll come on to that in just a second. But he said, I like the setup here, I love the guys, I want to reap the rewards of that a little longer. He said that, you know, with the 8 openings that are available, he would set the over-under at 4.5 that would be fired after 3 years. So the opening has to be right if he's going to jump ship to where he can see the path to getting that second contract more clearly than just your average job opening. He said the stars need to align. He's not going to just do it to just do it. That he loves geographically where they are. He said his family love being there. And he said he's only going if he feels great about the opportunity. And in terms of it may be getting harder for him to get a head coaching job in the future because he's ended up rejecting a few jobs. He said he's been talking to someone else in the league, and the longer you're in the coordinator chair, in terms of skill, it only helps you and helps you prepare for being that head coach. So whether, and I'm saying this for myself now, but kind of to fill in the gaps from what's being said there, the rest of the league and the press may see it as a blight on him for not taking that sort of opportunity, and he can't really control that aspect of what's going on. But in terms of his skill level, he feels like he's improving. And not just in the OC aspects, but learning from a head coach that he just really respects in the way he goes about business. And he was very complimentary about Dan Campbell in the way that he does things and manages to walk the tightrope of being the hard ass when he has to be, but also being able to have a joke and a laugh. So very interesting to listen to. In terms of the false narratives that came out about him as a person, because we all know that he basically got slandered in the press. He said it started last season And he said it comes with the territory. I'm ready for it. It's the NFL. That's fine. But he does feel sorry for the people that are around him that have to hear that from the outside. But he said he can sleep well at night knowing how it all went down and that it's all good. When asked if he's ready to be a head coach, just mentally, he said absolutely that he is. No hesitation in him whatsoever there. And in terms of the team itself and looking back at last year, he was asked about the team's struggles in the third quarter, and God knows that we were suffering through that, watching the games and talking to you all about that. But he said, if you break the season down into the first 10 games and the last 10 games, I don't know. No, did we play? We did play 20 games, so that would be right. First 10 games, last 10 games. First 10 games, we were awful in the opening drive of the third quarter. So that's fair cop. But in the last 10 games, we had a 50% touchdown rate. And he said, if you look at the season as a whole, it's been a failure in that regard. But if you split the season up like that, we actually showed tremendous growth in that. It wasn't good enough. But, at a 50% touchdown rate, you are going to be one of the guys almost leading the league in that capacity. So that they really turned it around and trending in the right direction. And in Josh Reynolds and what they have to replace, he said he was an explosive play waiting to happen last season. It showed in the self-scouting that they did, but him leaving gives opportunities for other guys to step in, kind of the same as what he was saying about the draft picks, be that DPJ or Antoine Green, or maybe it's not even a pass play at all. Maybe it's another rush for Monty. Maybe it's a tight end getting a reception like Sam Laporta or Brock Wright. So, there's the ability to really pass that around with lots of different weapons, or some of the guys that were regarded as backups previously. Ash, what do you think about Ben Johnson and what he had to say?
I think he handled the whole head coaching stuff really damn well. Obviously ties it back to Dan quite a lot, showing the respect he has for him, but also pointing out and he brought the facts to sort of back himself up. He brought the receipts to say, look, this is why I didn't. Yeah, there's great openings, but loads of these guys are going to get fired within 3 years, and he doesn't want that. He wants, if he's going to leave this great structure he's built himself, he wants to go somewhere where he'll get that time to build that structure, because there's no guarantee with the NFL. If he goes for it, it could be his only ever shot as a head coach. He probably will never get the Josh McDaniels treatment where, despite making mistake after mistake for some reason, you keep getting opportunities in this league to be a head coach. He might never get that, so he wants to leave for the right place. And with the whole thing in the Arctic, he wants somewhere where he knows he will have the right tools to get from the Arctic to the Caribbean again, to go party in the nice sunny islands. He doesn't want to go somewhere where he won't have a lot of resources, maybe an ownership that doesn't really trust him, maybe even an ownership that's just coming into things and doesn't really know what they're doing, but wants to make all the big flashy signings. He wants somewhere where he can be trusted with the setup. It's almost like, to bring English football into it, he wants to be the sort of Carlo Ancelotti at Real Madrid rather than the Carlo Ancelotti at Everton. That's a difference, because that's obviously kind of relevant these days with Real Madrid winning yet another Champions League last night. Well done to them. But yeah, I loved Ben's sort of conference. Still want improvement on that opening drive. Yeah, 50% coming out the half is an improvement, but I want to see that higher, because 50% is good. One in two drives. That's still 5 drives out of 10 games. Yeah, maybe the others maybe ended in field goals, but especially with how we played, like we were doing it initially in the season, where for the first couple of games, especially, we were taking the ball to start the second half. If you're doing that a chance to try and double up, you need to execute it well. And it's part of the reason that maybe we had that improvement is because we didn't have that pressure on ourselves, because we started taking the ball first, setting the precedent. Then when we came out the half, we didn't have that pressure on us to then have to go and execute. So that's maybe part of it, but I still want to improve that. I want to get to 60, 70%. I want to get to the point where it doesn't matter when the drive is, be it the first drive of the first snap of the game to the last drive of the game. I want us to be able to execute, because you can't have these dips and ebbs and flows in game scripting. I know it happens, but over the time of the season, it should hopefully balance out to where no matter when the drive is, no matter the game script, we're able to do something, because that's what the good teams can do. Look at the 49ers, for example. They were in the shitter against us. Yeah, partly we shot ourselves in the foot, but they were able to bounce back offensively and start executing. That's where we need to get to now. We can't have the sort of things where teams know at specific points in the game we're going to be weak, and that's where they can really put the hurt on us and snatch momentum away. We want to have our foot on the opponent's throats from snap 1 to snap 120 with the last snap of the game. We need to be the ones on top now.
All right, moving on to Scotty Montgomery. And they started talking about Gibbs a lot to start this one. He said that he's building finishing into a game, so kind of before it might be that he was looking to kind of run around some of these guys. Now he's just managing to kind of drop the shoulder a little bit and drive through people, which is, making defenders second guess what he's going to do rather than assuming he's going to try and run around them, which is encouraging to hear. He said he now understands his part in protection. Now it's moving on to what he can do in the receiving game because he can go to the next level. There's a difference between being a great check down runner and being a great receiving weapon out of the backfield and running routes from the slot when you flex out. When a guy hits his groove on the field, he said, we're often seeing that in practice on Tuesday to Thursday. You've got to remember in game who that person has been through the week, and when someone's hot, you don't want to take them out, specifically alluding to Craig Reynolds in that period of time, saying that, he put in some terrific training performances, and that's why they were putting him out there on the field. And, when someone's hot, you don't want to take him out, which, you can absolutely see with Craig sometimes when he's got the bit between his teeth. Is that a phrase, or am I just screwing with myself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. In terms of Gibbs, he said people focusing on what he's good and bad at, whereas I'm just trying to improve him all around as a player. I would argue knowing what he's good and bad at is part of that process, but never mind, Scotty, that's fine. He said that going from good to great is the hardest thing in this league. Going from bad to good is a steep learning curve, but you can get there fairly quickly, whereas going from good to great is hard because it requires a mentality of someone who is never satisfied with what they have. And in terms of the team and watching the tape and realising that we weren't good enough, basically, in any situation that they have, and that they can improve, removes complacency, and that they're just working hard every week to get to that point. On Sione Vaki, they said, we've made it really hard for him. He said he was very honest in his interviews that he was, kind of a two-way player, but actually that lacked some reps at the running back position, obviously. I mean, he really didn't play there very much. And he just didn't really know very much whatsoever coming in, but that he was very upfront and honest about all of that, but that he was willing to put in the work, and that he really has put in the work. He's got an old school mentality of grinding. He said he may not know the name of the things that we use for schemes or plays or what have you, but that he has seen and can demonstrate those things from having learnt about them. Once he's taught once, he doesn't have to be retaught. He commits it to memory. And also that it's actually a positive that, given that he's had so little experience on the offensive side of the ball, that he's not having to unlearn things. He's learning things sometimes for the first time, and they're just teaching him good habits instead of having to get him out of bad habits. And in that way, he's been as good as any rookies that they have on the offensive side of the ball, which is great given the lack of reps he's had on that side of the ball. On Jake Funk as well, the last question was about him, and he's been with Scotty Montgomery in his last 3 stops, including here, so he's someone that Scotty's kind of brought around with him, and he's asked why, basically. So he said he's professional. If you install it, he goes and does it. He has a little bit of wiggle out there, especially in wide zone schemes. He's efficient as a route runner, and he's consistently consistent. He just gets stuff done. Really interesting to hear, and actually a lot of the beat writers have been very complimentary about his receiving ability out of the backfield. So I do wonder if we've got ourselves a little bit of a Theo Riddick back here. Let's see. But got a little bit of wiggle in wide zone stuff, and he can, run routes. Sounds a little bit like Theo to me. We've missed someone like that, especially on third down. Aiden Hutchinson was then next up, but I'll come on to him in just a minute because I haven't asked Ash about Scotty Montgomery.
Well, I've loved Scotty for a while since we've hired him as the new running back coach and assistant head coach last year, placing our dear friend Juice Staley. But this shows why he's such a good coach and why he's stuck around in this kind of role for a while. And obviously why the Bucs wanted him as an offensive coordinator literally a week after we hired him to be our running backs coach, because he knows what to do to take players from good to great. He's done it numerous stops before, like obviously the most famous one being with the Colts a couple of years ago, taking Taylor from someone who was a pretty good running back coming out of college, could obviously run fast too for at least a year, the best running back in the league. If that's what you can do with Gibbs, hell, with Craig, turning him from that sort of RB3 that obviously we kind of have around because he's good enough and he does special team stuff. If you can make him into a proper, like, actually, no, Craig's here on his own merit at RB3, it's not just everyone else is bad and he does special team stuff, that'd be great. And then with Vaki as well, and obviously played a bit of running back in high school, I believe. Then went to safety at Utah and then had to come back because of the injuries there. It's right though that obviously it's almost that bowl of clay where he's done stuff before, so he knows the basic mechanics of it, but he's not having to unlearn all these bad habits, as you said, and he's just concentrate on learning how to do things in the NFL. That'd be great to see. And again, we saw Scotty Mould, Jonathan Taylor's a great running back, while Varky's not the same kind of player. Great to see that. And then with Funk, coming out of Maryland a couple of years ago, I know the Rams took him way back in the 7th, as good franchises always seem to do. Take a running back late and every couple of years, have them as a backup. Yeah, he's pretty good at that. He was good at it in college. It's just obviously being at Maryland and not being like the big, fast guy. Never really got too much exposure, but he's a good backup running back. Probably would expect him to sit in our practice squad right now unless he comes out and absolutely blows us away in pre-season. But as someone who's like, if you include the practice squad and the sort of the roster, which you kind of do right now, as a good like RB4, like an RB5, can't really get much better in this league. So it's nice to hear him get all this praise as well, because he's kind of gone under the radar a bit with everyone focusing on us bringing in Varky and what does this mean for Craig. He's kind of gone under the radar, but at the same time, it's kind of sad at the same time because not really mentioning Jamar Jefferson. And obviously, I don't want to mention too much because then Ant will pop up in the comments to defend him. But it looks pretty unlikely Jamar Jefferson's going to be aligned for too much longer, unfortunately, which is sad, but that's the way of the league, unfortunately. And I'm sure that Jefferson will land on his feet somewhere that doesn't prioritize special teams and pass blocking in their backup running backs like we do. He'll probably land somewhere that just wants a pure runner where if a starter goes down injured, they bring him in. I would have said the Panthers, but with them taking Jonathan Brooks, I already have Miles Sanders and Hubbard there. Maybe it'd be a bit redundant there, but if they can pick him up and maybe have him as the RB4, that'd be a great landing spot for him.
We'll see what happens. I mean, he was in our practice squad for the last 1 and a bit seasons. I think at the back end of the 2 years ago, he was on the practice squad as well. So I can easily see him being on the practice squad again, to be honest. We'll see. I realise I didn't say the thing I promised about Ben Johnson and my theory on him just before we move on out of the coaches into the players' press conferences, and I've kind of alluded to it in the chat, but I will say it now. Ben Johnson was talking about the stars aligning in terms of the right place at the right time for him moving on. And I kind of think what he's waiting for, not on purpose, but I think the thing that will attract him away, the right situation, will be when a coach retires from a good situation. And I know kind of waiting for that thing is a bit of a fool's errand, but you have situations like Kansas City and Andy Reid. And Andy Reid is, getting on in years, and with respect, someone of that age and weight and stress potentially maybe should retire sooner rather than later, despite the great situation that he's in. And I think that they, as an organisation, would love Ben Johnson because I kind of see there being similarities between Ben Johnson and Andy Reid stylistically, but also in the way they carry themselves as men. So maybe Andy has a bit more of a can laugh at himself sort of thing, but apart from that, I see that as being a good fit. And actually, the one situation I thought that would really appeal to him was Seattle when Carroll left, because although maybe that's not quite as good of a situation, but you're not leaving a team that has to completely rebuild and is in tatters. When he wants to have some more time in the sun, these are the sort of situations we're talking about. I mean, if the Steelers came up, I know the organisation isn't in a fantastic place, but you look at what's happened there and the success they've had over the years and what people think about that team, and that could be attractive. Or, Harbaugh has been in this position a long time in Baltimore. I know that he's not an old man, but, how long do you want to be in one job? I mean, can John Harbaugh spend 30 years in charge of that team? I don't know, but it might come up sooner rather than later. So I think there's opportunities for Ben to have the sort of opening that he's looking for coming.
You did mention the one that's popped into mind instantly, other than Kansas City. And I'm surprised because it's your favorite non-Lions quarterback. If the Bills don't make the big time this year, I could see McDermott going on his way. And what a place for Ben to land. Already got the QB. As much as I'm not as high on Josh Allen as you are, I think there's still some issues with him. And yes, they don't have a great receiving core right now. They're a pretty damn good team. And I could see Ben absolutely loving working with Josh Allen, maybe get him running a bit more than he's had to the past couple of years. I could see that being a great fit for him. But yeah, I agree where he doesn't want to go somewhere like a Washington, like a Carolina, where, yeah, he's having to do everything from square one again. He's almost feeling like that kind of coach that I think was it early this offseason or the offseason before, where, again, going to the DLP, there's 3 kinds of coaches. He wants to, I think, Ben be the perfect one where, to use the Lions, for example, where we had Caldwell and we were consistently 9-7, 9-7, 9-7. He's that kind of coach that you want where he can then take you over the hump with that sort of 1%, that sort of genius level. He doesn't want to go to be the first one where like Dan's had to be, where you've basically got naff all, you have to do it all yourself. Ben's the kind of person that is kind of like you've built the structure of the house is there. He's the interior decorator that takes it from being a £200,000 house that is all right to being a £750,000 house where you've got lovely floating staircase and a nice fireplace and a library room with a secret door that takes you into, I don't know, some secret place where you can plot American football, like play Madden and plot plays and that. He's that
beginning
kind of
to sound a bit like Cluedo now.
But it was Ben Johnson in the library with the play call sheet.
There we go. Right, moving on to players, and I'm going to do 2 at a time here because there's a little bit less to talk about. Aiden Hutchinson was asked about AG and about whether, the sort of talk about aggression is something that he's seen from him last year. And he said, yeah, at some point he did turn into his true self in terms of being aggressive, and you can feel that now in the off-season. So when you play the game long enough, in reference to the conference championship loss, you have enough up and downs to fuel yourself. You don't just need this one big event to give you the chip on your shoulder that people need. He said it does still sting a little, but it's only going to serve us well in the future. In terms of their own personal goals, he says he has some, but he's going to keep them to himself. I think that's been consistent year to year. And in terms of how they're feeling as a team, he said we're in a great spot right now. Confidence is sky high. People doubted us a lot initially, but this year we know ourselves and we can compete with the best teams, and that's giving us confidence right from the off. And about the fights that were happening, I alluded to this before, but you said it's a mindset and it's intentional and that they're trying to breed that sort of thing. Broderick was next up to the stand, and he said that he's definitely taken a leaf out of Aleem's notebook in terms of losing some fat, gaining some muscle, retoning his body. He said the challenge from last year wasn't so much physical as it was mental and not playing, and he said this year he feels hopefully a lot more ready than he was coming in last year. On DJ Reader, and this is the quote that everyone's been just, I wanted to say creaming themselves about, but I think that's probably appropriate, actually, to be honest. He said, yeah. DJ Reader, he's a good dude. He's been helping me out. I've been leaving him alone to do his rehab, but been talking quite a bit outside of that. The first time I talked with him, he'd watched all the film, and it was qualified. He didn't just mean Broderick's film. He meant all the film, which is insane. And the first time they met, the first time they ever talked to each other, DJ Reader was talking about moments on Broderick's tape and giving him pointers on how to improve his game. And he said, I really appreciate him for that and being that much of a pro and taking the time to do that for him, which was super interesting. And finally, Terrell Williams, the new lead D-line coach, he said, he's a great coach. He's coached a lot of players in his career. He's bringing a dog to the room. He understands me well and has helped me a lot. He's been focusing on my hands and being more aggressive and violent in my game. And in terms of players that he has told him to watch to try and emulate, even if they're not necessarily exactly the same sort of player, he was told the presser, the people in the press conference that he's been told to watch Tyed Tart's game tape, who was a nose tackle for Tennessee last year before moving on to Miami this offseason.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Hutch and Broderick, Ash?
Well, Hutch was his usual self. Perfect polished pot presser, saying the right kinds of things, hitting all the notes, which you're kind to expect from him. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just how Hutch is. And that's his personality. And it's all well and good. And he said that, I say, said right kind of things, keeping the goals himself. I can see him obviously wanting to better the sacks he got last year, be a bit more consistent with it because, yeah, he hit a lot of the numbers, but in terms of the pressures becoming sacks, that was mostly the end of the season. He probably wants to get that, like I was saying earlier, with coming out into the second half of scoring, he wants that to be more consistent. He just doesn't want to be pressures, sacks. He wants it to be nice and consistent. That would probably be his goal, at least if I was him, that would be my goal. But yeah, he's right with the playing long enough. You have enough ups and downs to feel himself. I know obviously coming from Michigan, it doesn't sound like he'll have that many, but obviously consistently not getting to the bit like sort of big time and not winning the Natty probably did hurt him a bit, bringing that kind of mentality. And now where, okay, yeah, we did make the conference championship, didn't win it, using that kind of thing, he's got that sort of experience. And then with Broderick, again, hitting the right kind of notes, slimming down, getting a bit more muscle. I know obviously everyone's hearing from Riz that it's like lost a lot of the fat in the cheeks and that. What kind of thing you want since he's hitting NFL weight room, proper first off season in NFL, time to prepare for the draft, right kind of thing. And it's refreshing to almost when he was asked about what was the challenge in not playing last year, he took a few seconds to really think about the answer and answer it right, which is great to see from him. And then him saying, yeah, it was more the mental learning how to be a proper NFL player, how to read the game and that, also how to just act as a pro. It sounds like something very much worked on. Obviously, doing the whole body transformation is part of that, but then being accepting criticism from someone when it's your first time meeting them and like, hi, this is how you can get better, do this, and this, being so accepting of that and taking it on board makes sense. And then being the same with Terrell Williams, who's probably not spoken too much before, but then being told to watch Tia Tart's game tape, who I actually think might be a decent-ish comp for Broderick, because Tart, yeah, he's not your top level nose tackles like Kenny Clark used to be, for example, but he's a damn good nose tackle. And if that's who Broderick's been told to watch now, that'll give him a good baseline. Then you can maybe branch him out to watching other players and build him up that. But just getting to that point where if we do have to play him because Reed or Liam's got injured, and we can have that sort of baseline of, okay, there's a proper DT3 we can trust against the run, because that's what we want our D tackles to do first and foremost, it seems. That's great. So really good presses from both of them, in my opinion.
Moving on to the final two, Hendon Hooker and Sam Laporta. So Hooker said he was trying to focus on not thinking too much and just feeling it, turning his brain off and playing as opposed to making too many checks and being slow, therefore. He said it's a team effort and they've done great trying to groom me, whether that's JT, JG, BJ, lots of names thrown out there of guys who are trying to bring him through. He says he is a lot stronger now than he was before he got injured and a lot bulkier up top, and actually that's changed how he's had to throw, and because of the injury he's ended up having to learn to kind of walk again and throw again in the last 12 to 18 months, which is pretty rough, really. About the Jared Goff contract, he said it hasn't changed his perspective. He's going to be ready to play when his number is called. And in terms of specialist usage on packages, because obviously he is a bit of a threat with his legs, they're talking about the prospect of him coming in on goal line stuff. He said they haven't talked to him at all about that yet. And about Teddy, he said he's a mentor along with the other guys in the room. He's like the big brother he never had. He's a great pro. Sam Laporta afterwards said it was great to check out a bit after the season, recoup a bit, not have to focus on draft and travel, etc. Just kind of give him some time out, especially considering he was rehabbing from quite a few injuries last year. If you remember, he got pretty badly injured in the mix to the playoff run, and it looked like he wasn't actually going to be able to play in the divisional round, I think, as well as the conference championship, but did manage to make it back for both games, albeit a bit hobbled. So he said it was good to just be able to rehab those things. He said that the consistency in the organisation means that they're reinstalling things that they had learned already from last season rather than installing completely new things, or at least to some extent, which means there's a bit less than a gazillion things to learn, because he was listing all the things as a rookie that you have to learn in terms of learning the layout of the facility, learning all the names of the people you're working with, learning the routine, as well as learning the plays and all of this and all of that. And now that's kind of one element that you don't have to worry about too much, which is great. On JMO, he said that he looks so much more comfortable this year, so much faster than he did. List out posts, pylons, and go routes specifically, which is interesting to hear. He said he's really happy that Brock Wright is back, that basically he's a second coach on the field and that he relied on him a lot. He was delighted that the organisation didn't let a guy like that go, which I think, yes, you're showing love to your bro in your room. Equally, I think it speaks of something which Brock Wright hasn't been talked about before, and it'd be interesting to see whether other people talk about him in that way, but I've never heard of people talking about him like a coach in the room. So, interesting to hear that. In terms of the knee and ankle and body, he said they feel great. He alluded to the fact that he needed some work doing to the ankle, because he said he didn't have to have work done to the knee, which would indicate that he did have something done to the ankle. He didn't elaborate on that. I'm presuming that was kind of talked about previously, but I really don't remember hearing anything about that. And in terms of the things that he's trying to improve, he said blocking in the run, specifically when he's coming up against big defensive ends and they're just able to lock out with those big arms, how he's going to counter that, because otherwise he's just going to lose without a plan. And not giving away too many tells in running routes. So he's going out there, and if he's doing this thing, he's kind of alerting defenders to exactly what he's going to be doing and trying to not do that when he's running his routes, which is interesting to hear. That was it. Have you found anything on his ankle?
Well, obviously it did happen. It was, so this was referred to, it was just before so it must have it happened when he was casted off against the Vikings, probably because he had a bit of an ankle thing then. Obviously, then he had the injury that obviously everyone was worried about. But yeah, it was probably just a bit of a clean-up thing. It might have been just, because I know he had a bone bruise, so it might just have been like maybe a tiny bit chipped off and it needed cleaning up, like just one of those like clean-up procedures, nothing too major, because if he's out there running routes, that's a good sign, considering Branch probably had a similar thing with his ankle, because he obviously had an ankle injury as well, and he's on the scooter and that, so yeah, it's probably a less invasive one, but it's
that's
good
fair
to hear that he's on the mend.
All right, thoughts on Hooker and Laporta in general?
Probably start with Laporta, since we're talking about him. Just again, comes back to the whole thing. It's nice to see him sort of first proper off season in the NFL, getting his body right, as said, rehabbing injuries, but also just being able to just relax and not have to worry about the draft and getting ready for that. He can just sort of focus on getting himself back in the right place, because it's probably a bit understated about how much of a mental drain it is on the players to just be on for basically like from the, let's say, start of August to potentially the start of February. That's a long time just to have to be constantly be on thinking about football. As much as we love it, it'd probably be draining for us as well. So it'd be nice for him just to sort of lie in a hammock on a nice beach somewhere and get himself right. And it's also nice to see him being complimentary to JMO, especially since on those deep routes, that's probably what I want to use JMO on the post, pylons and go routes as clear outs. Maybe saying it because, as I say, it's clear outs for him, so then he can go underneath and get all the catches. Wouldn't be too surprised, but this is how it is. And it is nice to hear speak nicely about Brock. I know obviously I made the face when it was like delighted the organisation didn't let a guy like that go. Perhaps speaks more to the fact that I was wrong by saying we should have signed him to the tender and all that. But if they're happy for him to come back, and if he's a second coach out there, maybe if we do eventually get someone better than Brock in, he could transition to that sort of coaching role on the sideline that we've seen quite a lot of our former players the past couple of years do. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater becoming a high school head coach. And I think there was some rumours as well that maybe Graham, if he when he goes, he suppose he might be considering it, because he's constantly by Hank Fraley's side on the sidelines when he's not playing in that. It's just nice to see that we're the kind of players as well where, yeah, if you need someone to basically shout on you and feel like this is what you need to do, speak of someone again that has to have that happen to him when he's playing, it's very nice to have someone in that room. So good to hear that from Brock and then with Hendon. Yeah, nice to hear, obviously, bulked up. having to learn again, throw again, run again makes sense because obviously his body type will change. Using English football as an example, seeing the transformation that a player for my team, Tyrone Mings, who had an ACL tear in the first game of the season, having to watch his sort of recovery from that because he's been documenting it on his social media. Been quite, I don't want to say quite nice because that sounds wrong, but it's been quite informative and insightful to see how these players recover, especially since he went over and did a lot of things in America. So maybe Hooker's done a kind of same kind of stuff, especially since there was like a VR thing that helped Mings learn how to run again and play football. So maybe Hooker could have done the same with having to learn to throw again the mechanics. I know obviously there's that VR game. It's like NFL QB, maybe played a bit of that. Who knows? And it's nice to hear him still mention Teddy as a mentor when Teddy's obviously gone to be a high school coach. Would it be nice if he maybe mentioned Mark Brunel, obviously our QB coach, maybe. But if he's mentioned JT Barrett, that is very good news. Obviously,
it might
JT
just
Barrett
be that I missed out mentioning him rather than he missed him out.
How could you miss out the Jags franchise leader and interceptions thrown in the season?
I can only apologise.
Okay, but it's nice he's mentioned JT Barrett again, former player, obviously the Ohio State quarterback. Nice to hear him getting a mention because that might be someone where if Brunel goes or if something happens, he might become a QB coach one day. So it's nice to see we've already got that pipeline working, even on the really small roles in the team. They're getting shout outs and maybe we're getting a bit more public perception and maybe start moving on the ladder as well.
All right, that is all we have for this week. And we don't have any questions, so I am going to briefly sign off now. And if we do get any questions, then we might answer them just after we've done our sign off bit. Maybe take them off the air, but there we go. It looks like that we may be doing our first quiz this weekend. So keep your eyes and ears open. It might not be Saturday, but it might be Saturday evening. And by Saturday evening, I mean Saturday evening US time. So potentially something like 6 p.m. Eastern or something like that. It's going to be a quiz on Lions and NFL stuff. It might just be 20 questions or so. There will be a minor prize for the winner. There will be 4 quizzes that we're planning at the moment. If you are the overall champion, you will win a Lions custom jersey of your choice. The standard jerseys, the new ones that are available now. Name and number of your choice, standard stuff you can get from NFL Shop. I think we're going to do a $10 NFL Shop gift card for the winners of the individual quizzes. It is open to all, including the Roar of the Lions guys, because I have made it. I am not entering. I will be quizmaster. They've not seen any of the questions. And actually, on the most part, I've made up the questions myself, rather than referring to the quiz books I have bought. So, it should be a fairly even playing field. It's a really cool app that you can use to do these quizzes, so it should all be in real time. So please do come and join me for that. I will try and put it out there in advance when we're doing it. The reason I may not be doing it is my rugby team is in the final of the league on Saturday, so I may be going to Twickenham for that, which is the England National Rugby Stadium in London to watch that. So it's going to be a trip and a half, and I'll probably be drinking fairly heavily for that too, because it's rugby and you must drink. So we'll see what happens. It may be that I defer it to potentially another day. Maybe rest it one more week, but we'll see. It's coming. Anyway, College Podcast, we were saying it's on hiatus, but the guys have actually agreed to do the Season 4 premiere next week. Now, I know that filming for it, or recording for it, hopefully is going to be next Tuesday. That is June 11. Whether they live stream it or not, I'm not sure, but you should see the College Podcast's 4th season starting next week at some point. So do, again, keep your eyes out for that one, because I know that Ant has put in a huge amount of work into that. So really looking forward to hearing what he has to talk about. There's going to be a CUSA breakdown, and look ahead to that. You can find us on Roar of the Lions UK, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. You know where to find us. And the group for worldwide fans is Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. If you haven't been to that Facebook group, it truly is for everyone, and you will see lots of good stuff about tailgaters on there, all of the people that me and Ash hung out with in Detroit, they're all in that Facebook group. Some great photos of the draft being there, the games and tailgating that happened there too. So come and join us on that. And the website, rotluk.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. As I said before, it really does all count. Thank you for listening or watching. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Ash, for doing this with me. We'll be talking rookie minicamp next week and potentially doing that round table I promised last week. So fingers crossed for all of that. But for now, let's go Lions, One Pride.
One Pride.